Born to a noble family in the north of the continent, the Viscount de Lettenhove, Julian Alfred Pancratz, also known as Dandelion, grew into one of the most famous poets of the 13th century. After attending a temple school, Dandelion moved on to the prestigious University of Oxenfurt, where he spent 4 years studying the 7 liberal arts before completing his education and becoming a professor. A ladies' man from a young age, the poet was loathed by many husbands, as he eagerly bedded women regardless of their marital status. It was this passion for women that first introduced him to poetry at the age of 19, finding inspiration through an affair with a countess. After working briefly as a professor, Dandelion set out to travel the world, earning a great reputation as a bard. But the height of his fame came from his stories about Geralt of Rivia, a valiant, good-hearted witcher from the Wolf School of Kaer Morhen, whose actions had lasting repercussions for the entire continent. Having earned some minor fame for a massacre which nicknamed him the Butcher of Blaviken, Geralt was traveling in Edirn when he first met the poet Dandelion, finding him both annoying and impossible to ignore. Joining Geralt on his mission to confront a devil stealing grain, the poet hoped to compose ballads about their adventures together, in spite of the Witcher's protestations. Yet he quickly learned about the challenges associated with such a partnership when they were captured by the Free Elves of the Blue Mountains, who were working with a local non-human creature to steal seed for planting crops. Despite their appearance as outlaws, the elves were the descendants of those who once ruled these lands, and still answered to the king in exile, Filavandrel, as they waged a futile war against humanity. Although the Elf King considered killing Geralt and Dandelion, arguing with them about the history of elven oppression, he ultimately allowed them to leave relatively unharmed after learning that the Witcher spared the life of Torque, the Sylvan who was helping them steal grain. Seeing that Geralt showed mercy to a non-human, the king realized he was different than the others of his kind. Despite being an extremely private person, Geralt slowly started opening up to Dandelion as they traveled together and became best friends. Inevitably, the poet started integrating stories about the Witcher's life into his writing, most famously composing songs about his relationship with the sorceress Yennefer of Vengerberg. Tied together through the magic of a genie, Geralt and Yennefer had an intense and tumultuous relationship, falling deeply in love despite having little in common and very different personalities. Through his songs, the continent learned of the many tragedies which befell their relationship and ultimately drove them apart for years. Dandelion also wrote about Geralt's relationship with Princess Ciri of Cintra, the daughter of a queen who lost her family during the First Northern War, only to be adopted by the Witcher, as their fates were tied together through the law of surprise. Having saved the life of Ciri's father years earlier, Geralt was promised that which the man had but was not expecting. This turned out to be the pregnancy of his wife Princess Pavetta, meaning their daughter Ciri was destined for the Witcher. In time, Ciri also met and lived with Yennefer, who became her mother, and so Dandelion wrote about this unusual family, gaining more fame and recognition than ever before. Frequently in trouble with the law, Dandelion worked as an informant and spy for the Redanian Secret Service, while also reporting to Temeria and others whenever it proved necessary. For a time, he even left the Northern Kingdoms to live in Tucson, where he had an affair with Duchess Henrietta, wife to the ruler of the realm. However, when their relationship was discovered, the poet fled for fear of his life. During the Second Northern War, when his friend Geralt embarked upon a perilous journey to find his missing daughter Ciri, Dandelion insisted on becoming the first member of his company. Soon enough, they were joined by several others, with their journey taking them to Tucson, where Dandelion's old connections served them well. Fortunately for the poet, the former ruler was now dead, and Duchess Henrietta was in command, allowing them to restart the romance from years earlier. Treated as honored guests, the Witcher and his friends remained for several months, but eventually set off to continue the journey. Having attained a position of privilege and basking in the glow of his rekindled relationship, Dandelion chose to stay behind and build a life for himself in Tucson. Departing, Geralt eventually saved both Ciri and Yennefer before returning to visit Dandelion, informing him of all that occurred since their parting, including the battle at Styga Castle, where the rest of the company was lost. Ironically, the poet's fate was almost the same, as he had a falling out with Henrietta, who sentenced him to execution, only to change her mind at the last moment, sending him into exile. Fleeing the realm with Geralt, the poet remained the Witcher's closest friend, and was even with him during a terrible pogrom in Rivia, where non-humans were targeted and massacred. By the time Yennefer and Ciri arrived, Geralt was severely wounded and near death. The sorceress then collapsed as well, having spent all her energy in futile attempts to save him with magic. Refusing to let them die, Ciri used her unique abilities to transport the three of them to another world where they could be healed, and so said a final farewell to their friends Dandelion and Triss Merigold. Remembered as one of the greatest poets of the age, the work of Julian Alfred Pancratz was compiled in the books The Adversities of Loving and Time of the Moon, yet perhaps his most well-known writings were found in his memoirs, Half a Century of Poetry, in which he recounted the incredible events of his life, dedicating large portions of the text to his friend Geralt and their adventures together.